Hello and welcome to Aston Originals, where today we're discussing the prevalence of antimicrobial resistance and the effects it's having worldwide. You can follow us on Twitter at Aston Originals and subscribe on YouTube as well for all the latest Aston University digital news content. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jonathan Cox. Good morning. So we're going to be discussing your recent article that was published on The Conversation. Please do go and check that out later. There'll be a link to it on the screen. Now, your article on antimicrobial resistance reflects on a new study that suggests it causes more deaths than HIV/AIDS and malaria worldwide. Firstly, Jonathan, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dr. Jonathan Cox. I'm a senior lecturer in microbiology, and I spend most of my time working to better understand very nasty microorganisms, nasty bacteria that cause very aggressive infections. And part of that is understanding the antibiotic resistance that they have. So this is a significant area of my research and something that I'm particularly interested in, understanding antibiotic resistance and how we can overcome it with new antibiotics.
Well, firstly, antimicrobial resistance is spreading rapidly worldwide. A recent paper published in The Lancet has revealed that antimicrobial resistance infections caused over 1 million deaths and were associated with nearly 5 million deaths in 2019. This is greater than the number of people who died from HIV/AIDS and malaria that year combined. Now, firstly, could you tell us a bit more about why this could be happening and what it means for us?
Sure. Well, since we first discovered penicillin in 1928, we've been using antibiotics for a whole range of different bacterial infections, and they've been prescribed very freely. They were used for just about everything that made people poorly, and they were at one point just described as the medicine for the treatment of just about everything. And so our considerable overuse of antibiotics, alongside our efforts to try and prevent bacteria in other parts of our life. Okay, so for example, agriculture, where we're trying to produce animals for food, for example, or in aquaculture, even where we're trying to use grow fish for the same reason. Even in industrial processes where we're trying to stop pipes in factories getting clogged up with bacteria, or in veterinary medicine where we're throwing antibiotics at sick animals in a hope to make them better, or even in just our domestic products, for example, our toothpaste, our shampoo. There are drugs in there called biocides, which are effectively antibiotics that prevent bacteria growing in the toothpaste or in the shampoo and causing it to spoil. They extend the shelf life of that product. And so us using all of those different things over such a considerable amount of time has created a golden opportunity for bacteria to evolve at a quicker rate than they otherwise would have. We've created what's called a selection pressure. We've provided an opportunity, an opening for bacteria to evolve these very complex mechanisms of resistance. And in some cases, they've evolved resistance to multiple classes of antibiotic, and these are called multi-drug resistant bacteria, otherwise known as superbugs, which you might have heard of. It's often talked about in the press. And more recently, we've started to identify totally drug-resistant bacteria. These are bacterial infections, that there is no class of antibiotic in current use that is effective at treating these bacteria. So all you can do for those patients is try to contain them, to stop the spread of that bacterial infection, which is untreatable, and also to try and ease their pain and suffering. And this is a disastrous situation. And in the past, we haven't invested or reacted as much as we should to this situation. So, for example, with climate change, we all know climate change is coming and that we need to do something about it urgently, but not enough is done to talk about antibiotic resistance. And it is the same kind of scenario that if we don't do something about it now, we're already on the slippery slope to it being too late. So it's really, really important that we react now. So this Lancet study is extremely timely to make people aware of the fact that antibiotic resistance is coming, whether you like it or not. But also, it highlights from a scientific perspective that antibiotic resistance is progressing faster than previous estimates. So it was previously estimated that by 2050, there would be 10 million deaths a year caused by antibiotic resistance, and it would overtake cancer as the leading cause of death worldwide. From this latest study, we know the situation is actually accelerating faster than our previous estimates. So it's so important that we do something about it now.
And just looking at the study, how did it draw its conclusions about the prevalence of antimicrobial resistance globally?
So the study uses data from all over the world, from all different countries, from a lower economically developed to middle economically developed countries, as well as sort of very developed countries. And it looked not only at the incidence of particular bacterial infections, i.e. the numbers of people that are getting it, but they looked at the numbers of people that are being successfully treated with those bacterial infections and the number of treatment failures. And they particularly focused on the antibiotics that we use as the frontline treatment antibiotics, okay? And so observing where the antibiotic resistance was within the reported population, they were then able to extrapolate that data, so to make a very, very accurate prediction as to how that situation corresponded to the whole world, where not everything is reported so readily. Okay, so they got a very accurate understanding of the situation globally from looking at very accurate and defined data sets.
Okay, well, how can bacteria develop antimicrobial resistance, and what can we do to reduce this risk?
Okay, so there are really 5 different ways in which bacteria can develop antibiotic resistance. One of the ways is that they can make enzymes, they can make these little machines that will destroy the antibiotics in the first place. Okay, and a golden example of that is the beta-lactamases or penicillinases. These are enzymes that break down beta-lactam antibiotics like penicillin. They just destroy them, and they're really efficient at it. So if the bacteria have these beta-lactamases, no beta-lactam antibiotics will be effective against them. And there's been more evolution. So as we've developed new classes of sort of beta-lactam antibiotics, like, for example, the carbapenem antibiotics, which are second generation, bacteria have also evolved alongside our evolution in terms of the science. And they've evolved adapted beta-lactamases, which are called ESBLs, extended spectrum beta-lactamases. And that means that the bacteria are able to tackle just about everything that we throw at them. Another way in which they can become resistant is with something called efflux pumps. Efflux pumps are machines in the bacteria that will pump antibiotic out of the cell so that the concentration of antibiotic in the cell doesn't get high enough to be lethal to the bacteria, so they can survive. The analogy I use for that is, it's like if your boat has got a leak and there's water rushing in, but you are bailing water out of the boat, and you can bail water out faster than the water comes in, you'll stay afloat. And the bacteria can survive in very much the same way. They can get rid of the antibiotic faster than it comes in, and so as a result, they can survive in the presence of that antibiotic. There are other ways they can become dormant as well. They can sort of play dead, if you like, and hide. They shut down parts of their metabolism. They can change their cell wall and stop the antibiotics that would normally just diffuse through the cell. They can stop them getting in the first place. They are extremely effective and efficient at adapting to stop antibiotics having a lethal effect. And the bottom line is, the more we use antibiotics, the more we create an opportunity, a selection pressure for resistance to occur. So Antibiotics need to be used, but they need to be used sparingly. We need to use them when it is important to use them, obviously, because otherwise people are going to die, but we need to use them perhaps in smarter ways, okay? So one of the ways that I've been working on to overcome resistance evolution is that rather than using one type of antibiotic, you can use several types of antibiotic in combination. If you use one type of antibiotic that works in one way, the bacteria only have to change or adapt in one way to become resistant. But if you use 2 or 3 antibiotics that work in different ways, the bacteria would need to change 2 or 3 ways to become resistant to that antibiotic. So you're reducing the selection pressure. You're creating a much more difficult scenario for the bacteria to evolve. And statistically, you're reducing the chances of resistance evolution. And I believe that change in strategy will slow the rate of antibiotic resistance evolution in the future. So that's something that I work on in my research. Yeah, I think that probably covers it.
It's fascinating stuff. I mean, certainly around what you can do to reduce the risk. Just going back to something you mentioned earlier on, that you certainly touched on in your article, and that's some of the other causes driving this global antimicrobial resistance crisis and how they're quite complex. You mentioned external factors involving taking antibiotics that can lead to environmental pollution, use of antibiotics in things like agriculture, and even preservatives in our daily things like shampoo and toothpaste, and how that all contributes. Could you just kind of go into that a bit more?
Sure, yeah. I mean, for years and years, we used antibiotics routinely in agriculture, for example. So to stop dairy cows from getting mastitis, which is an infection in the udders, which was really, really common, we used to just give antibiotics to dairy cattle to prevent that from happening. And of course, not only is that antibiotic going to be excreted in the milk, but also the cows are going to excrete naturally. And that goes back into the ecosystem. They excrete in fields that are next to streams, and as it rains, there's runoff, and so you're getting antibiotic and bacteria that have been exposed to antibiotic but survived the exposure to that being transmitted not only from that local area but into water sources, into all over the place, and so we don't have an effective means of being able to control that. Same happens in us. We take antibiotics, our metabolism will break down certain aspects of the antibiotic, but some of it will remain, some antibiotics will remain unmetabolized, and we will excrete it. And that goes back into the food chain. In London, it's it's commonly known that drinking tap water in London's already been through 11 people before you drink it. Well, you think about that. If we remove all the bacteria, we remove all the nasty things that could be present in sewerage, for example, to make the water safe to drink, but we don't look at the chemical and molecular level to see whether or not there's trace quantities of antibiotic left in there. The same with our showers, right? If we're using those known biocides, one example is triclosan, it's called, which has been banned within the European Union, but most of our toothpaste and shampoo is manufactured outside of the EU and brought in. So the fact that it's been banned doesn't make such a significant difference. Triclosan that's in toothpaste and shampoo has been shown to increase the evolution of efflux pumps. It increases the bacteria's expression, the production of these efflux pumps. And I said efflux pumps are the machines that allow them to bail the water and keep the boat afloat. We are knowingly using a product every day that allows bacteria to survive antibiotic treatment better. And we're doing that because, one, we have to wash our hair and clean our teeth, but two, because there's not a global control on these sort of chemicals, and that's what needs to happen. You know, it with the problem is a global problem, and it's not just a matter of you need to finish your course of antibiotics, which is something I've been very vocal about in the past. It's not just a matter of if you've got a cold, don't go asking your GP for antibiotics because it's a virus and antibiotics don't work against viruses. It's bigger than that. It's getting manufacturers not to use biocides that are going to increase the rate of antibiotic resistance evolution. We need to use antibiotics in agriculture, in veterinary medicine, that are different to the antibiotics that we use in people. That way we create some degrees of separation between, you know, resistance that could occur in animals and what could happen to us. Ideally, we don't want any resistance, but evolution is inevitable. So it's what can we do to tackle that? How can we continue to survive and thrive and do what we do, but without having such a dramatic negative impact on our environment, on the microbiome of the planet? So it's really important. It is, and the other thing that, the other big issue is that antibiotic discovery and development. So there haven't been many new antibiotics discovered since the sort of 1960s was the golden age of antibiotic discovery, when loads of different antibiotics were discovered. All that easy stuff to find has been found. So now you need to spend lots and lots of money on discovering and developing new antibiotics. So the average cost of an antibiotic from discovery right through to clinical implementation is about $1 billion. But the patent on that antibiotic can only be held for 12 years. So you've only got 12 years to recover the cost of your investment. And also, we call them like fire extinguishers. They're fire extinguishers. They're handy to have around. If you've got a fire, you want a fire extinguisher there, but you'd ideally not like to use it. They're fire extinguisher drugs. So big pharmaceutical companies are not keen on antibiotic discovery because the business model simply isn't there. They are not a good investment for getting a return from. So it's important. I mean, pharma is starting to change that attitude, but at the very basic grassroots level of antibiotic discovery, that's why it's so important that academics like me, people at universities that can take slightly more risks, be a little bit more innovative in their discovery approach, for example, can find these new molecules that then can attract big pharma and can drive that forward into clinical development. We are, in academia, we're a really important part of the future of that business model. And investment and money is everything, as we've just seen from the pandemic that we've all just been through. You know, if you throw good money at a problem, and you all work together on a global sort of effort to try and do something about it, you can really change the world very quickly if you put good money, good people, and you work together. And we need to do the same with antibiotic resistance before this becomes too far down the line and it becomes an unstoppable force. And the outcome could be that, you know, routine operations, very basic routine surgery, you know, C-sections, for example, or, you know, just normal injuries, for example, you could end up with a very life-threatening infection that may be untreatable. The mortality rate for basic infections may go up significantly. And we're already seeing that with things like gonorrhea, for example, okay? Multi-drug resistant gonorrhea, sexually transmitted infection, is increasing at a rapid rate. Untreatable sexually transmitted infectious diseases. And that's in the UK, not just around the world. But we're not hearing about it. We're not being told about it as much as we should be. And the investment is not being put there yet to create a solution to this issue.
Well, just thinking about investment needed and how much of an issue this is becoming. You mentioned in the article that it's been linked to the next global pandemic. Could you just sort of explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. This has been a pandemic coming before the coronavirus pandemic, and we didn't talk about it as a pandemic. And now I think we have to accept the fact that it's a pandemic. This is a global problem, and it's not going to go away on its own. It's only going to get worse. It is very much aligned to climate change. If we don't do something about it, if we don't actively change the way in which we operate, not just as individuals, though there is stuff that we can do individually, as I mentioned, but around the world, if we change the way in which we operate and we wake up to antibiotic resistance, then we can do something about this before it's too late. But if we carry on the way we are, the current trajectory is that by 2050, so within our lifetime, this is going to be a major killer. And you can't vaccinate against antibiotic resistance because it's not one organism. It's bacteria, all different types of bacteria. It's a really serious issue, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to be able to talk about this because it is so fundamental that we do something about it.
Okay, and anything else to add on that?
Finish your course of antibiotics and don't take antibiotics unless you need to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time today, Jonathan. And once again, you can follow us on Twitter at Aston Originals and subscribe on YouTube as well for all the latest Aston University digital news content. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Stay well.
Will do.